Going the distance with local sports. This is the X Sports Network.
Bring your outdoor dreams to life at Loretto Nursery and Landscaping. This one-stop shop can help you get your project done from start to finish. Go see for yourself. They have a wide variety of plants, from tropicals to ferns and trees, plus hanging baskets. What they have to offer goes beyond what looks good. They also supply concrete, mulch, compost, and drainage culverts. Don't forget about their on-lot buildings and chicken coops. You think that's all? You can also stop by to fill up your propane tank. Loretto Nursery and Landscaping has you covered. Stop by 409 South Military Street.
When it's time to build a home, remodel, or add on, Hamby Builders is this area's experienced construction company. From site selections to floors, doors, windows, trim, tile, bathrooms, and kitchen, the Hamby Builders team can make your home the home of your dreams. Hamby Builders is licensed and insured with over 20 years of experience in homes in Giles, Lawrence, Wayne, and Murray counties. Trust your home construction or light commercial project to the team with experience and integrity. Hamby Builders. Call 931-629-5264 or 931-629-9472 today.
Gifts and goodies galore await you at Miss Millie's in downtown Lawrenceburg. From brands you know and love, like E. Newton Jewelry and Tyler Diva Wash, to unique specialty gifts, you will find it all here. Whether you're looking for the perfect gift for someone you love or shopping for yourself, shopping local is the way to go. We have home goods, women's fashion and accessories, baby items, and lots of seasonal decorations. Our friendly staff will welcome you in, help you find what you need, and even package your gifts for you. Also, we can't forget to tell you about our popular bridal registry. Future brides can come and create their perfect registry with us. So stop by Miss Millie's today. We're located in the northeast corner of the square in downtown Lawrenceburg.
Going the distance with local sports. This is the X Sports Network.
And I'd like to welcome everybody in here to the Mark My Words College Sports Show here on the X Sports Network. I'm Michael Marks, your host, and we got a lot to get into. We got an AP poll to break down. We've got a bunch of great games to break down. Week 7 was one of the best we've had this season. And we have some coach firings to even break down. I mean, there's a bunch of crazy stuff going on. And we'll hop right in to Friday night real quick, actually, before we get started. My picks went a lot better this week, 15-5, a lot better than I believe it was 13-6 or 12-7 last week. Not my best week, but a lot better this week. And looking at these at the 5 games I did get wrong, I would say 3 of the 5 I did to myself, and we'll start with one of those. Friday night, South Florida and North Texas. South Florida in the top 25 once again, heading on the road to face an undefeated North Texas team, one of the biggest games in all of the American Conference this year. And it was a good one for a half. It was 21-21 at half, and then you check the score a couple minutes later, and it was 42-21, 5 minutes into the second half. So UCF ended up winning that one 63-36. Byron Brown was awesome, both through the air and on the ground. His dual threat ability, 245 yards and 3 touchdowns passing, had 21 carries for 82 yards and 2 touchdowns rushing. And I believe that those rush numbers do tally the I believe he was only sacked once, maybe twice. So it didn't have anything to skew those to one way or the other. But for North Texas, man, Drew Mestemaker wasn't ready for the spotlight just yet. The kid's a freshman. He hasn't been playing quarterback for too terribly long, and you could see that Friday night. I made it home in time to watch the most of the fourth quarter of that one, and you could just tell South Florida is a much better team offensively and defensively. there was a ton of turnovers in this game. South Florida had 2, North Texas had 3, but the run game, the trenches, the physicality, that made a difference. Alex Golish, the head coach at South Florida, former offensive coordinator at Tennessee. Tennessee likes to run the ball. South Florida is the exact same. 306 rushing yards against North Texas. I mean, that is absurd numbers. Those are service academy type numbers that you're putting up against another opponent, and you threw the ball, a good bit. Let me get the exact numbers. 22 for 28 through the air, 57 carries for 306 yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground as a team. You got a lot from Byron Brown, Chase Garnett, Alvin Isaac, even Sam Franklin did a pretty good job. So it was just a total team effort, and they looked really, really good. So South Florida up to 5-1 on the year. North Texas drops to 5-1. South Florida right now is the heavy favorite to be the Group of 5 representative. In 2 weeks, we'll probably have that more than likely answered. They got a big game coming up in 2 weeks at Memphis, and then 2 weeks after that, a game on the road at Navy. Those two teams still undefeated for right now and fighting for that last playoff spot. We'll break into Saturday morning, the first game of the day on ABC. Number 8 Alabama at number 14 Missouri. The Tide took that one 27-24, and folks, Bama's legit. I think we just need to, as a collective whole, take that Florida State game from week 1 and just throw it out the back door, because it does not matter anymore. We'll get to Florida State in a little bit. They are not doing well, and Alabama just looks like a completely different team. I didn't think missing Jam Miller would have as much of an apparent effect as it has. Obviously we're without him until Georgia, and since that Georgia game, Bama has been on a heater. I mean, obviously the 3-point win against Georgia, a big win at home against Alabama, and then you go on the road once again, and you get a 3-point win over a ranked Missouri team. That's 3 ranked wins in as many weeks, and these were teams that we thought Georgia was really good. Now, thoughts have changed. We thought Vanderbilt was really good, and I think we still have pretty high hopes for the Commodores, but obviously they were off this past week, so we didn't get to tell, and we were high on Missouri, and just seems like they didn't have it. Usually when there's an early game like this that has upset written all over it, you kind of get a feeling early. And Missouri drives down the field, scores a touchdown on the first drive of the game, but it didn't have that feeling that most of those early upsets have, because Alabama responded and went on a 6-minute drive of their own, capitalized by the Kevin Riley touchdown. And it was 7-7 after 1. Missouri was able to, make it 17-10 at the half with the field goal, but Alabama looked comfortable in this one. Ty Simpson, when he was given time, now he was pressured a lot. Missouri's defense actually impressed me a little bit with their tackling. There were some things that I had some concerns about coming in that they solved. It was their defense was not the problem on Saturday, but Ty Simpson was awesome when given time. Jam Miller ran the ball well. Riley and Hill, when they got carries, were big. Caden Proctor got a snap at Wildcat. I mean, it looks like this Alabama team is having fun, and going back to things I said during the summer was about how quiet Alabama had been and how terrifying that should be for the rest of the country, because when they're quiet, that means that they're happy with what they have, and they did it. Obviously that week 1 game was really bad, but since then they have been all over it. I mean, really, the next week with a 73-0 win over ULM. And Alabama did all this without Ryan Williams. He had 1 target the entire game, no catches. Isaiah Horton looked really good, but that throw that Simpson made on 4th down late in that game was the difference. I mean, it reminded me a lot of the Gunnar Stockton throw at Tennessee to kind of, ended up winning them that game. This play sort of ended up winning them that game for Alabama, and I mean, that throw's huge. And if he can make those on the road, that should make any team going into Bryant-Denny Stadium terrified. And there's one with a pretty bad defense going in there Saturday. So we'll talk about that one a little later on in the week. But a really good win for Alabama. They stopped Ahmad Hardy. And the nation's leading rusher was getting like 7 or 8 yards a carry. Went 12 carries for 52 yards and a fumble. Had an 11-yard burst, but other than that, it was a lot of 2 and 3s. Maybe a 4-yard run every once in a while. Jamal Roberts had an all right day, but he got most of his yards on that one long breakaway run. So it forced Bo Pribula to be a passer. And if you go look at Missouri's team stats, Pribula isn't a pocket quarterback. He is a dual threat. He can run. Plays with his legs are what he excels with. Not saying he's not a good passing quarterback, but when you force him to become one, just a passing quarterback, because they also took away his run pretty well. It's a hard game to play, and Alabama's secondary exposed them. I mean, 2 interceptions for Pribula and in big moments too. Missouri had a chance and kind of squandered it there at the end, but I still think we need to look at them as a good team, but they got a pretty tough stretch in their schedule coming up here in the next couple of weeks, so we'll see if Missouri's really got it. We'll head over to the big noon kickoff. Ohio State, number 1 in the country, going on the road to face the 5-1, number 17 ranked Illinois Fighting Illini, and Ohio State got out the gates hot. Got up 20-0 early, and I mean it was really before you had blinked, and it seemingly felt over. Now, Illinois did a really good job in the middle quarters. They brought it to 20-10 at some point in the third quarter. But Luke Altmaier, threw his first interception, was getting thrown around. Weren't able to get a consistent run game going, but there was a 2-play stretch in the first half that really kind of summed this game up in a whole. There was a play Illinois on third down, trying to throw an out route, I believe, and the receiver had stepped out but came back in. He was pushed out by the corner but hadn't reestablished himself in bounds in time. So that turns that first down into an incompletion. Now it's fourth down, and there was a bad snap, and your punter goes down on a knee to field the snap, and you're down there, and that goes from maybe a 30 or 40 yard punt to a loss of 14 on the ground. So it was just all around not a very good day. Now in total, Illinois outgained Ohio State through the air, almost 100 yards more through the air. Weren't as good on the ground, obviously, and had more plays, but turnovers and sacks, time of possession, I mean, all the things you need to do to win the game, they weren't able to. And, Ohio State hasn't done anything exceptional this year because they haven't had to. Nobody has crazy stats. I mean, saying 19 of 27 for 166 yards and 2 touchdowns. Okay, so, about 70% completion percentage. He's close to the 80s this year. Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate had decent numbers but did nothing crazy. Ohio State doesn't, they are by far the best team in the country this year. They don't have a test left until Michigan, and they won't get tested again until Michigan. Now, you got Wisconsin, a bye week, Penn State, Purdue, UCLA, and Rutgers. I mean, UCLA might be the best team left on Ohio State's schedule, and that's not even a joke looking at what they did. We'll get to them in a second, but it was just an all-around not a great game for Illinois. Their playoff chances are probably gashed now at 5-2 with their 2 losses being the 2 best teams they face. Now looking at Illinois' schedule for the remainder of the year, they do have some room to they should win out. I'll just put it this way: they have their first bye week finally coming up after playing 6 straight games. Actually 7 straight games. They're 5-2 and have not had a bye week yet. So finally get this next week off. You go to Washington after that. Rutgers, bye week, Maryland, Wisconsin, Northwestern. So that's a very winnable 5 games. We'll see what 10-2 has yet in the Big Ten, but that's a conference that I feel like we're learning less and less about each week. Cincinnati 20, UCF 11. One of the weirder games in the morning slot. Cam Fancher got the start for UCF, the FAU transfer, and he was pretty good. 222 yards through the air, 108 yards and a touchdown on the ground. So 330 yards and a touchdown is all right. They needed more than 1 touchdown. UCF outgained Cincinnati in this game, 413 to 306. More play. They almost had twice as many plays, 90 plays to 48 for Cincinnati. Time of possession was 40-20. I mean, it was all UCF had the ball the entirety of the game and didn't put a touchdown up till the fourth quarter. And Cincinnati didn't play great. Sorsby wasn't great. The run game was all right, but it was all UCF stat-wise, but Cincinnati had more points at the end of the game, and the Bearcats up to 5-1 now. And a new entrant into the top 25. We'll get to that one in a little bit. UCLA 38, Michigan State 13. I'm just convinced Deshaun Foster didn't practice with his team at all, ever. He may not have even known who was on his team. This just seems... we have two teams right now, each in the Big Ten, that have done complete 180s from where they were 3 weeks ago. UCLA hadn't led once this year, and now they're blowing out Michigan State, beating Penn State. I mean, it's just all around impressive. Nico seems to have figured things out to some degree. I mean, they're not forcing him to do a whole lot with the ball in his hands. You know, he wasn't much of a rushing factor in this game, and that's, you know, probably by design. I mean, they ran the ball a ton of times, and they didn't need him to do it. When you can rush the ball 43 times for 238 yards and 2 touchdowns, and your quarterback is only 6 of those rushes, you're doing things right. So, you know, he's 16 to 24 for 180 yards and 3 touchdowns. Aiden Childs, you know, got a little banged up. Alessio Milivojevic was not awesome for Michigan State. But Jonathan Smith's team, the Sparties have got some real problems they need to figure out. Yeah, I thought they had a chance, especially with the young quarterback in Childs, to, I'm not saying going to be the Indiana, because Indiana was a really good team last year, but to be that kind of surprise team out of the Big Ten. I mean, now it could be Nebraska, it could be Iowa. I mean, we really don't know what to think about the Big Ten. But look, it seems like UCLA has figured things out. And funny enough, I've seen some posts where there is a path right now for Northwestern and UCLA to be in the Big Ten championship game. That would be funny. I mean, hey, UCLA. They hadn't led the first month of the season, back-to-back wins. Props to them. Both conference wins, too. You know, they're only 2-1 in conference, and that one loss is to Northwestern. So, you know, like I said, we learn less and less about the Big Ten each week. Michigan State transfer, their running back Jalen Berger for UCLA was big with 3 touchdowns. And props to Tim Skipper, Jerry Neuheisel, you know, that entire interim staff, it feels like. They did a really good job rallying this team together and making them turn it. I'm not going to say that they've just become a great team all of a sudden, but they look like they're having more fun out there. They look like they're inspired. They look like, you know, it's a little more easygoing, maybe, so to speak. So props to UCLA. We'll head down to Oxford now, where the number 1 team in the Pac-12 and the number 1 team in the SEC had a matchup, and it was a close one. 24-21 at Ole Miss with the win. And Lane Kiffin said at post-game his team showed up to play about as well as the nearly empty student section. Washington State came to Oxford and played nearly perfect, and I don't mean that they you know, quarterback never had an incompletion or something like that. Just in the fact that they played about as well as they could have played, and it just wasn't enough. Ole Miss starting to maybe get exposed as, you know, they're possibly not the 4th best team in the country. They've just won their games up to this point. Zevi Eckhouse, the quarterback for Washington State, was great. 24-31, 218 yards and 2 touchdowns. Their rush game wasn't a huge factor, but it was for Ole Miss. Kawan Lacey, 24 carries, 142 yards. Trinidad Chambliss had a rushing touchdown, and he also threw for 250 yards and 2 touchdowns. Ole Miss's defense showed up to play. Their offense left some to be desired on Saturday, and they're going to have to watch out because it's the SEC, and they got a huge one on the road coming up on Saturday. This is not a game I picked, and I've had to put it on here because, you know, it deserves to be talked about. Pitt 34, Florida State 31. I really thought, you know, I'd watched Pitt earlier in the season. I watched them against West Virginia, and I watched them against Louisville, and those were 2 very bad games for Pitt. We'll just put it that way. They have changed quarterbacks since then. They have you know, gotten some guys back from injury since then, and those have made a world of difference for this team. You know, I didn't think Eli Holstein getting benched would lead to much good for this, but Mason Heinzschel has been awesome in really just 2 games. We'll say I think it's been 3 games actually. Yes, his first start was halfway through the Louisville game, so actually no, it wasn't. So his first start was last week against Boston College, where he threw for 323 yards and 4 touchdowns. This week was just as great. 21 of 29, 321 and 2 touchdowns. Did have the 2 interceptions early in the game, but bounced back from those exceptionally well. And Pitt got Desmond Reed back from injury. They're, you know, one of their best offensive gadget style players. He had 200 yards total offense, 45 on the ground, 55 through the air, receiving, and 2 touchdowns through the air. So a really good game for Desmond Reed. And Florida State's defense has been exposed 3 weeks in a row. We saw Virginia do it, we saw Miami do it, and now we've seen Pitt do it. And it keeps getting worse and worse each week because, that Virginia team has a really good offense. This Pitt team had to switch quarterbacks a couple weeks ago because Holstein was such a turnover problem. And now they're beating you at home. Back-to-back losses at home for Florida State, and that seat is getting real warm on the rear end of Mike Norvell. We'll hop into the afternoon slate. We'll talk about the big one first. Number 7 Indiana, undefeated, going on the road to face number 3 Oregon, undefeated. I picked Indiana for the one reason that Oregon has kind of built themselves off that win against Penn State. It's like, hey, we won on the road at number 3. We won on the road at Penn State, a wideout, all this, that, and the other. Penn State or Northwestern just went on the road and beat Penn State. They're not the number 3 team in the country. They lost by 20 to Tulane. So the Big Ten is just a total loss. But hey, the Hoosiers' defense was awesome. Dante Moore played below average. He was not very good in the clutch. Had 2 fourth-quarter interceptions, and Oregon effectively had no run game, which is something that they had kind of not going to say define themselves off of, but Oregon always has a good run game, and they have since the Chip Kelly and the Marcus Mariota, LaMichael James, Kenyon Barner, those days, DeAnthony Thomas. They've always had a good run game, and Indiana shut that down. And you got to realize this was at Oregon. This was at Autzen Stadium, and you're getting 2.7 yards a rush. I mean, not to say that Indiana ran the ball much better, but there was a difference. Mendoza, I think he's got the DNA to be a championship quarterback. He threw that pick 6 early, mid fourth quarter, and Oregon tied the game back up. It was 20-20. And what does he do but lead his team on a 6-minute drive that was 12 plays, 75 yards, and a touchdown to get them back in the lead. The defense made a couple of big plays with those interceptions. They got another field goal on, and at that point it was too late for Oregon to do anything. Indiana, they're legit. I'll just put it that way. They are legit. A game not on TV, streamed exclusively on Peacock. NC State 4-2 going on the road to face the number 16 ranked Notre Dame Fighting Irish. It was an ugly game early, back and forth. Notre Dame really blew it out late, 36-7. It was tied 77 and then 7-7, not 77, pardon. And then Notre Dame scored 29 straight to close it out. The defense was big. Every NC State drive in the fourth quarter either ended in an interception for them or a safety. C.J. Bailey made too many mistakes, and then with Smothers, they couldn't even get the run game going at all. So props to Chris Ash and that defense. They have gotten better week after week. And, watching Notre Dame is actually really interesting because if you watch them throughout the year, they are one of those very few teams that week after week you can tell they continue to build on things and get better. There can be an SEC team that runs for 300 yards one week and then 50 the next. They don't build off of it all. Notre Dame and their coaching staff build off of things that they do well. And talking about 2 guys that did things well, Will Pauling and Eli Raritan really stepped up in that passing game for Notre Dame. You have a wide receiver that hadn't been huge all season, and then Notre Dame's good with their tight ends, but not throwing to them enough for 100 yards good. But those 2 guys were really big for Notre Dame. And all in all, I really do think this Irish team is really impressive, and they have a tough game coming up next week, and this will really show if Notre Dame has what it takes to possibly be one of the last teams out of the playoff, or one of the last teams in the playoff, or is this another 8-4, 9-3 Notre Dame team? Nebraska 34, Maryland 31, and once again we have a not as bad as last week, but another fourth quarter lead blown by the Maryland defense, and they almost kept them in this game for so long, and Dylan Raiola was not great whatsoever. Had 4 touchdowns and all the yards and this, that, and the other, but when you throw 3 interceptions, that takes almost everything you did out of the equation, especially when it was on. It was only on 30 throws. That's a 3% interception rate in this game. That is terrible. If you're going to throw 3 interceptions, throw the ball 50 to 60 times. I mean, that's not going to get it done. But once again, Emmett Johnson had a big game for Nebraska. I like to see them improving on their run game. almost 200 yards on 30 carries. So getting around 7 yards a carry, that's big. That's what kept them in this game. And the quick turnaround or the quick drives early for Nebraska. Their first 3 touchdown drives in the first half were on a combined 6 plays. And other than that, you only had that field goal in the first half. So, did Nebraska just benefit off chunk plays, or are they just built to make chunk plays like that? Maryland wasn't bad. I think they're going to be an all right team, but there's levels to this, and Nebraska is a much better team. Not much of an effort to run the ball for Maryland. About 4 yards a carry, 4.2, 4.3 yards a carry, and just not enough in the receiving end to get anything done. But Neziah Hunter had 2 touchdowns for Nebraska. He was big. But props to the Cornhuskers, 5-1, and their schedule coming up is very manageable. I'll put it that way. It's not like they're going to go through and clean house, but your last 5 games being Nebraska, Northwestern, USC, UCLA, Penn State, and Iowa, those are all winnable games. Maybe not as much UCL or USC and UCLA. That one's on the road, so that one could end up being pretty tough. I don't think we're going to know anything about the Big Ten until after the season. I really don't. You look one week and Nebraska can't stop the run. Their defense isn't any good. And then one week it steps up big and their run game is making plays, not their quarterback. So just too many inconsistencies. And I saw a stat this morning. I believe it was on SEC this morning on the SEC network. The average margin of victory in SEC games this year is about 10 points a game. 2 years ago it was 16. Last year it was 14. So we're seeing the parity even more and more as we get further into this NIL and transfer portal era of college football. The craziest game of the day. Hold on, I'm going to get a sip of water before we get into this one. Northwestern travels to Happy Valley, goes inside Beaver Stadium, 108,000 fans, and they get a win at Penn State 22-21. I was wrong about this one. I'll admit it. I don't know how this happens. You have a team that was supposed to be so good, because if you look at this, Penn State's in an utter collapse. They have looked uninspired. They don't want to be there. They just look dead inside almost, so to speak. There's no life behind them since that Oregon loss. Because remember, before that, they were the number 3 team in the country and were undefeated. Because Northwestern didn't come in and do anything spectacular, out of the ordinary, trick plays, crazy this, that, chunk plays. They just played a good, clean football game and took a win away from Penn State. But let's talk about Penn State for a minute. I always think they're a little too highly rated in the preseason because they can't beat top 10 teams. And the 12-team playoff was perfect for James Franklin, because that meant that every year he could go 10-2 and lose his games to Michigan and Ohio State, or Michigan and Oregon, Ohio State, whatever the combination of those two be, maybe all 3 of them, and he'll be the 10th or 11th team in the playoff, and he'll make the playoff every year and make Penn State look a lot better. That has not happened. Let's just look at things. You go from the preseason number 2 team to this point. Even 3 weeks ago, you were number 3 in the country, to 3-3. Unranked, 3 straight losses, 2 of those to 20-point favorites, or to 20-point underdogs. That has never happened to a ranked team ever. Now you have no quarterback because Drew Aller's out for the year with an injury, and now you don't have a coach because you just paid James Franklin $50 million to go sit at the house. And you're paying the dude $20,000 a week, mathematically speaking, $20,000 a week for the next 6 years to sit at home. Listen, if somebody offered me $49 2/3 million to not do my job, you would never see or hear from me again. I'll just put it that way. Where does Penn State go? Because you don't fire somebody with that, at that big of a program, with that big of a buyout, if you don't have something ready. And thinking of things, looking at available coaches, there's not a whole lot of extremely talented college guys. Do you think Bill O'Brien? Boston College isn't great, but it's also Boston College. Do you go back to Bill O'Brien? We've seen a lot of teams going back to old head coaches, that have done good things to their program. It hasn't gone too well this year, but that's neither here nor there. I think that I mean, I am honestly speechless just trying to fathom all of this, because it is so weird. But if you have a $50 million buyout and it's gone like that, I mean, Penn State didn't even take more than really a day to think about this. I mean, he was gone by 1 o'clock yesterday, 12 o'clock yesterday. I mean, it is just utterly insane. But it means that they know that they can go get a guy, because it is Penn State. They can probably go get whoever they want. To a certain extent, they're not going to get like a Kirby Smart or a Dan Lanning or a Ryan Day. But they could get a Bill O'Brien. I think that Brian Kelly is a name that could be considered. So a lot of fun stuff going on in college football. We'll just take a quick second, real quick, just to see if there is any update on this situation as to who some names would be. So right now, the hot board via Pete Nakos, Matt Rule at Nebraska, I think would be an outstanding hire. And I think we're starting to see that maybe he's hit his ceiling, so to speak, at Nebraska. I'm not sure how much better they can get, because it's not 1995 anymore. It's not Tom Osborne. It's not Tommy Frazier or Scott Frost or Tim Crouch, whoever running that offense. It's just not it. Kurt Cignetti at Indiana, I think, is a great choice. I don't know if he would leave, though. Because usually when you would think of Indiana and football in the same sentence, you would think, yeah, if they had a good coach, he would leave, because it's too hard to win there. It's impossible to win there. Kurt Cignetti's proved you can win there. He's lost 2 games there, and he's been, and he's, like 19-2 now as a head coach at Indiana. Insane. Matt Campbell at Iowa State is a great candidate. Obviously, we haven't talked much about Iowa State in the past 2 weeks, especially because of the 2 losses to Colorado and Cincinnati, 2 of the lower echelon teams, so to speak, thinking in the Big 12. Hey, why not go for another Vanderbilt coach? Clark Lee has done an outstanding job at Vanderbilt. Maybe a better job than James Franklin. I mean, James Franklin never beat Alabama, the number 1 team in the country. He never got it to a point where Vanderbilt's talking smack going on the road to play Alabama. I mean, it is unreal. I think the best candidate for this job is the next one listed here, Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri. I mean, Missouri has almost no football history. I mean, Gary Pinkel did a pretty good job there, but really, other than like 2007 when they had Jeremy Maclin and Chase Daniel and a bunch of talent like that, they haven't been crazy exciting. I think that, but now that Drinkwitz has been there and been there for a while, he's proved that he can build a winner. Now, obviously, Saturday proved that he's still got some learning to do. But I think at Penn State you're going to get the resources you need, and at that point you're putting yourself in a point where you're already the 3rd or 4th best team in your conference at that point. I don't know if Missouri's there in the SEC or could get there. Manny Diaz at Duke is also an option. Here's a quote from Matt Rule about the Penn State opening. Quote, "I'm not going to talk a lot about job openings when they come. I'm not going to talk about my contract here. I absolutely love it here. I want to continue to take the steps needed to turn this place into a beast." So that also makes me think that Matt Rule probably won't leave. He is one of those guys that, he built Temple up. He tried to build the Cleveland Brown or the Cincinnati, Carolina Panthers. That too many NFL teams starting with C. And that one didn't work, but he's done a great job in college. Let's go to the Red River Shootout. I'm not going to call it the Red River Rivalry. I never will. It is a Red River Shootout, and it always has been, and it always will be, but not a shootout this year. The Horns take down the Sooners, 23-6. Okay, we talked about it all week. John Mateer, he wanted to play. 17 days, as of Saturday afternoon, when this game started, was 17 days removed from surgery on a bone in his thumb and his throwing arm. It was they showed a graphic. It was, I believe, this bone right here. I'm not going to get into all the technicals so y'all can see how little I know about bones and stuff like that. But they showed, what the procedure was, how it was done on a graphic on ESPN. And then they showed Mateer in warm-ups. And, throughout the week he went from doubtful to questionable to probable. So that, kind of gives you an indication. But to me that means one thing. Oklahoma had zero faith in Michael Hawkins throughout the week. He played last week against Kent State, did what you needed, but there was never a chance that Michael Hawkins was going to play in this game. So I think that doomed them from the start. Mateer said he was fine, but you watch him in warm-ups, and, I mean, his hand is incredibly swollen still. He's got it taped up really, really cool, big, and maybe that had an impact on the game. And he looked like he was in pain throwing. They said, there's no pain, and there was showing him warming up, saying that there was going to be no pain in his hand, and you could see him wincing. I think Oklahoma. I hope they don't play them next week against South Carolina, but I'm hoping Oklahoma learned their lesson in this game, and that a quarterback at 100%, a former 4-star quarterback in Michael Hawkins, at 100% is so much better than a quarterback on one arm, and it's not even his throwing arm. Because listen, Material was your leading rusher heading into the game. He has had to do it all season, through the air, on the ground, and now he can't. I'm not going to say down the road he can't, but as of now, he can't run the ball 15 times a game for 80 yards because he doesn't want to damage his hand any more than it already was. He got sacked 6 times. It doesn't want to be look any worse than it already is, because that could break his hand fully, and he's done for the year. And then all of Oklahoma's playoff shots that were slightly gashed are done. Texas' offensive line, though, was the MVP of this game. They looked great in pass blocking. Arch only went down once, and they gave him plenty of time to throw. The run game opened up, but Arch looked much more comfortable in the pocket. Made some big throws, and then that opened up the run game. Completely for Texas. And that was one thing that we had not seen from them this year. Their offensive line had not done a good job in run blocking, and it had forced them to become I'm not going to say a one-dimensional team, because they weren't even exceptionally good at throwing the ball during that time either. It was almost more of a detriment. But you look, Wisner, 22 carries, 94 yards. 35 rushes for 136 yards may not look great in the sense that, that's almost 4 yards a carry, but this is what Oklahoma did on the ground. 30 rushes, 48 yards. They were getting 1.5 yards a carry. I mean, that's not going to win you a single game. I don't care if you out-threw Arch, because he only threw 25 passes, for, 21 of 27 for 166 yards and a touchdown. Looks like he did everything he needed to do. But hey, props to Texas. That was a big win for them, and I'm not going to say they're a contender in the SEC yet, because they have a brutal schedule. Not as bad as Oklahoma's, but pretty close in the sense where, next they got Kentucky, Mississippi State, but then you got Vandy, Georgia, and Texas A&M to close the season. It's going to be tough for Texas, but that was a big win that they needed. Arkansas at Tennessee. Hey, 34-31 Vols. Their defense did not look great, but Aguilar looked good without Chris Brazzell, and I think Arkansas could be a fun team throughout the year, but Deshaun Bishop looked really good. This was a game built on the running backs. You had Mike Washington, 19 carries, 130 yards and a touchdown. Taylon Green, 17 carries, 63 yards and a touchdown. Tennessee's defense has some problems in the run game, and the lack of secondary is starting to show that. They were pretty comfortable at secondary last year with Gibson and McCoy, but without them, they've struggled tackling on the outside, and Mike Washington talked smack all week and backed it up. So props to Arkansas. They're not great, but they're a whole lot better now with Petrino at the helm. Florida and A&M. A&M takes that one 34-17. It was tied 14-all after the first. A&M scored on their first 3 drives of the game, touchdowns. And it was a group effort running the ball. 40 carries, over 180 yards, 3 touchdowns. And that allowed them to keep the ball out of Florida's hands, because that's kind of what happened there at the end. Lagway wasn't bad. Jaden Ball wasn't bad. They just played a really good team on the road and got beat. And that's what happens. We'll go over Iowa, Wisconsin real quick. Iowa 37-0. Look, Iowa could be a sneaky team in the Big Ten. They look a lot better on offense, and the defense is doing its thing. Wisconsin is bad. They keep trying new quarterbacks. It keeps not working. I don't expect Luke Fickell to have a job much longer. He hasn't been fired yet as of 1 p.m. Central Time on Monday, but that could change. Georgia 20, Auburn 10. Hey, listen, if you were not a fan of Georgia or Auburn, it was a great game to watch. SEC officiating is a problem, and it has struck Auburn week after week. If you go back and look at the Tennessee-Arkansas game, the penalties were 11-1 towards Tennessee, and you can't convince me that one of those teams is that much more undisciplined than the other. The penalties weren't more one way or the other in this game. It was just one where Georgia caught a break. Their quarterback's calling timeout and then says he doesn't want it, and they go with that. There's the touchdown, no touchdown with Jackson Arnold. He either scored or Georgia scored, and they gave Georgia the ball at the one. They make questionable calls every week, and it gets worse and worse each week. But similar to what I said, and it just feels like Auburn just continues to get robbed by SEC officiating. But if you're getting robbed by officiating to a degree, there's also a part of you that thinks you should have won those games, that you could have won those games, and this team laid down after that fumble. Similar to what I said last week with UCF, Auburn is not going to be a good football team until they get a good quarterback and probably a good coach too. I don't know if Hugh Freeze has really got it, because it looked like he allowed his team to lay down after that bad call. Texas Tech blows out Kansas 42-17. Texas Tech has one of the most efficient passing attacks in the country, and they didn't have to pass Saturday night. It is Monday. Cameron Dickey, 21 carries, 263 yards, and 2 touchdowns. They have by far been the best team in the Big 12. Their closest games are 24 points each. Daniels wasn't bad for Kansas, but he's not enough alone. And LaShawn Williams goes from 3 touchdowns last week against UCF to 5 total rushes. That's not going to win you many games. Michigan, USC. The Trojans take this one 31-13 out west, and Michigan's defense that hasn't allowed 7 yards per play in a game in almost 4 years allowed a freshman walk-on running back, King Miller, went 18 carries, 158 yards, and a touchdown against that Michigan defense. There were no Wayman Jordan or Justice Haynes in the second half, so both teams without their starting running back, and that completely made Michigan's offense look lost, and that's why they lost this game 31-13. Props to USC for finding more backs to play, but their pass game also looked pretty good. Jaden Maeva is a great quarterback. He's a great talent. I don't know if Saturday was enough to get him in the Heisman talks. Obviously, odds haven't been totally updated yet, so that'll be something we can talk about on Wednesday. But, looking at what he did, 25 of 32 for 265 yards and 2 touchdowns. Didn't run the ball much at all. Actually, at all. He was sacked once, and that's it. So, I don't know if he did enough, but Wayman Jordan also had a pretty good chance, and him getting hurt hurts him. But big win for USC. They're back in the top 25, and I think they could be a sneaky good team in the Big Ten. South Carolina, LSU, that one was LSU 20, South Carolina 10. That was just an ugly game. I did not watch it. What bit I did watch was not fun. It was just an ugly football game. That was two bad offenses with a pretty good defense. There were bad mistakes on both sides of the ball for both teams. But in a game, and I thought South Carolina would come out ready. They didn't. Sellers has no help around him, and that in return makes him look bad. But LSU just had enough talent to win a game when both teams are looking bad. BYU gets a comeback win, 33-27 over Arizona. Bear Bachmeier wasn't great on the road, but he had some upperclassmen to help him out, in contrast to Maryland. LJ Martin, 25 carries, 162 yards and a touchdown, and Parker Kingston, 5 catches for 117 yards and a touchdown. Those guys were huge. Arizona had a 24-14 lead in the fourth quarter and let it slip away. But props to BYU's defense for not letting Arizona, extend their lead in the fourth and end up winning this game. Now it sets up a huge game with another team we'll be talking about in this next game for the Holy War next week. Number 21 Arizona State at unranked Utah, and Utah wins 42-17. You're like, what the heck does that mean? Because unranked team beating a ranked team at home, sure, but 42-17. Arizona State was without their quarterback, Sam Leavitt, and it was pretty obvious. I watched most of this game, and Jeff Sims, he had his moments in Nebraska, had his moments at Georgia Tech, but he's not a passing threat at all. And that allowed Utah's defense to kind of pounce on the run game, and that's one thing that had made Arizona State so good that they just couldn't do. And in contrast, Utah just pounded the rock and made sure that Arizona State really never had the ball. On the ground as a team for Utah, 42 rushes, 276 yards, and 6 touchdowns. They only threw 13 passes the entire game. But But all around, a great week of college football. My picks, again, were 15-5. Hopefully we can maybe get that to 20-0 next week, depending on the caliber of games. But let's go over the AP poll real quick. Newly in at number 25, Nebraska. Illinois dropped out. Michigan dropped out. Teams like that. Nebraska, newly in. Arizona State also dropped out, and they're not even getting votes anymore. 24, Cincinnati. Crazy. Cincinnati and Nebraska have the same record, and Cincinnati's ranked above Nebraska despite these two teams playing a game this year on a neutral field, and Nebraska won. I digress. Nebraska has lost more recently, obviously. Cincinnati's won 5 in a row and are one of the hotter teams in the country. So props to them. Utah back in. They're 5-1 at number 23. Memphis up to 22. Texas newly in, back in at 21. USC back in at 20. South Florida 5-1. They're up to 19. Virginia up 1 spot to 18. Vandy up 3 spots to 17. Missouri only falls 2 spots back to number 16. BYU at 15. Oklahoma drops 8 spots to 14. And yeah, deservingly so. They did not look good whatsoever, but they got a chance to bounce back next week. And the votes are really close between them and Notre Dame. So 13-14, almost a tie, really. Like I said, Notre Dame up 3 spots to number 13. Georgia Tech and Tennessee and LSU and Georgia each go up 1 spot to 12, 11, 10, and 9, respectively. Oregon and Indiana pretty much flip spots. Oregon to 8. Bama and Texas Tech each rose up 2 spots to 7 and 6. Ole Miss at 5. A&M at 4. Indiana 3. Miami 2. Ohio State 1. So right now we are in a college football world where Indiana, Texas A&M, and Ole Miss are in the top 5. Texas Tech is in the top 10. And we're trying to decide whether Memphis or South Florida is going to make the playoff and how bad Penn State is. And that's why we love college football. So that will do it for the Monday edition of the Mark My Words College Sports Show here on the X Sports Network. We'll be back Wednesday. We got some college basketball to talk about because we got the preseason AP poll today. We got some preseason media polls, first team, second team, this, that, and the other. So we'll go over that Wednesday and maybe a little more football throughout the week. So for Michael Marks, this has been the Mark My Words College Sports Show on the X Sports Network. Have a good day, everybody.
Going the distance with local sports. This is the X Sports Network.